Third Degree Net Podcast. The Third Degree Net Podcast. The Third Degree Net Podcast.
Third Degree the Podcast is brought to you by the Lindstrom Law Firm. For wills, trusts, probates, and business law, call 469-515-2559. That's 469-515-2559, or visit lindstromlawfirm.com for a free consultation.
Well, hello there, FC Dallas Curious fans. Welcome to another episode of Third Degree, the podcast. This one is number 271. It is moi, Peter, and he is here. He is back. Dan Crooke. Howdy, Dan.
Hello.
Hello. How high over the moon are you today as England makes it to the European finals?
That was an interesting way to say it, Tad Lasso. It's fun, right? We get to lose to Spain in the Women's World Cup and then the Men's Euros. That's enjoyable.
All right. Well, I didn't know if you'd make it tonight because I didn't know if you'd be all drunk and stuff.
You know, you really think I'm this prolific drinker when I'm just a standard middle-aged man that drinks socially every now and again.
Oh, okay. Well, it's England playing, and you won a game, so, you know.
Yeah, but, I mean, I
your
turned
divine
18
right
a long time ago, so, you know, I'm past my prime years.
Okay. And your hero, my hero, everybody's hero, editor, founder, thirddegree.net, and the original soccer influencer, Buzz Carrick. Come in, Buzz.
Peter, proud to say that I am currently fifth in the kick-around European projector pool.
Oh, are you?
Yeah, and if England wins, I think I'll finish second. There's three guys with Spain in front of me, and then a guy with England Spain combo. So,
Dan has predicted you'll be losing that race.
Yeah.
So okay.
I mean, Spain looks good. I gotta admit.
Well, it has been a wild day as England won their semifinal. Mr. Berhalter got the shit can. And Colombia beat Uruguay in the semifinal of the Copas, and Darwin Núñez went in the stands and punched out a bunch of Colombian fans. So I don't know. And on top of all of this, we were intending to record this after the Dallas-Kansas City Open Cup game, but that game has now gone into a lightning delay. Which means we have no idea when that game will finish up. So we're going to go ahead and start the podcast by talking about the two games that we do know about, and we'll figure out the rest of it when we figure it out. How about that?
You've just ruined the magic of editing.
Spoiler. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
FC Dallas had a great insert scoreline here result.
I didn't think of it that way. Well, Buzz doesn't want to have to spend a lot of time editing. We'll just do this as best we can. So here we are. While we wait for by the way, by the time when we started this, they had started the second half. It was 0-0. Very dull first half in the Open Cup. But before that, Dallas, in the course of two games, there was 10 goals in two games of FC Dallas action. First up, the win against the Timbers at home, 3-2, and then the loss over the weekend, 2-3 to Sporting Kansas City. I have no idea where this team is, Buzz, but it does, at the very least, seem a little bit more entertaining.
Yeah, they're all over the place, quite frankly. By the way, Dallas has scored 26 goals in its last 15 games, so, you know, at some point they've changed something, and that even goes back to some of the late stage Nico Seves stuff when they were, you know, starting to give up goals as he tried to get forward and win games. But you know, the takeaways are that this is still the same roster that they had before, which has some of the same defensive deficiencies, particularly crosses into the box. You know, aerial challenges are not. They were a problem early in the season. Have reared their heads again. But it's a product of trying to free the team up. And no matter what you think about how good or bad the roster is, at least Peter Luxane is letting this team play and get forward and try to score goals. And so the record is roughly, I was going to say roughly the same. It's not roughly the same. He's basically playing 500 ball, Peter Luxane is. You know, but at least it's entertaining. Like, goals are happening and goals are fun. You know, it's okay. I'd rather be winning 3-2 and losing 3-2 and playing 500 than I would be playing 200% and losing 1-0 all the time. So,
or 0-0, 1-1 draws.
Almost draw, as Dan is or not Dan, El Jefe has rightly pointed out, you can draw yourself to death in this league and be out of the playoffs real quick, when wins is worth 3 points and a tie's only worth 1. So, yes, it's still a 500 team. The chances that they're going to climb into the playoff picture are frankly, ridiculous. They need 21 points out of the remaining 12 games, which would be equivalent. Approximately 21 points. It's never set in stone, but roughly 21 points, which is 7 wins. And they've only got 12 games left, and 6 of those games are home games. So they have to start winning on the road, which they haven't done all year. So, at some point you just have to accept the fact that, okay, let's at least be entertaining. Let's at least score some goals and see if we can get the front end of the team working, because it hadn't been for a great part of this season. And that seems to be happening. You have to enjoy the freedom and the tactics that Luc Sain is doing are fascinating to me. I'm quite enjoying them as I'm now getting a handle on what I think he's doing all the time. So, it's fun for us to analyze it, and the cup game will be different in terms of how it plays out because it's a West win effectively. And then who knows what's going to happen in Leagues Cup, which is coming up soon.
Dan, you ready to anoint Peter Luc-Sain as the new FC Dallas manager full time? Just get it over with.
Fuck it, why not? Honestly, I'm enjoying the soccer. That's such a big turnaround to the past year and change. And I was doing some quick math about the XG. Kind of not always the best statistic, but under Nico Estevez this season, FC Dallas has averaged 0.95 expected goals per game, which culminated in his last 2 games. Sorry, his last 3 games combining for just 1.3. Peter Luc-Sain has averaged 1.925 expected goals per game. We've been crying out for attacking soccer to go with this $10 million striker and a high draft pick striker and everything else. And hey, it's happening now. Yeah. Don't mind conceding the odd goal. Sure, throw Dante Sealy marking on a corner. That just makes it more fun.
Okay.
I got accused of piling on Dante Sealy last time when he was responsible for all those goals, and they put him again in, and he did it again. So it's like, at some point, it's not piling on.
No, it wasn't piling on to begin with. You were pointing out an obvious player error and lack of judgment, and you were proven right.
Well, he literally made the exact same error that he was hugging on Wilfred, whatever his name is, and the guy just let him drift away, and he just scored an easy header. So he did it again. So, at some point, you stop putting him in. That'd be nice. But, one of I do think there's a disturbing trend that happened in these last 2 games we have to talk about.
Well, before we get to what is not working,
okay,
let's talk about what is working. I know you're talking about that, like Luc-Sain has allowed them to go forward and create more. But what tactically is he really doing? And my bigger question is, how much of this is there's just certain players actually playing better?
Well, some of it is that. Sebastian Lletget absolutely has come alive under this coach and is playing the best soccer, I think, of his entire Dallas time. Not of his whole career, just his time in Dallas. He's won. Logan Farrington has crossed over whatever the rookie hurdle was and is now playing like not a rookie. That's really exciting. He's being fouled an obscene amount of times by the other team, which tells you that they think he's dangerous, that they have to foul him like that. He's working well with Petar Musa. Siki and Sebeling is playing the best soccer he's ever played here. Confidence is an amazing thing. He's making some passes into Petar Musa that Jesus Ferreira had missed when Jesus was playing in that same role. So there's some guys doing really good things. Tactically, what Luc-Sain is doing is very specifically what all the coaches of the last 5 or 6 years have always said about tactics is that tactics are fluid. And if you want to start talking about, oh, you're playing a 3-4-3 or a 4-4-2 or whatever, they'll say like, it doesn't really matter what you want to call it. And the last couple of games, what you would describe as the base formation almost doesn't matter because the shape is flexing in and out of two different shapes. It's flexing from a back four to a back three, primarily with the right back. It's not the same way that Greg Berhalter did it with Tyler Adams. It's not that version because the guy's not jumping in as a six. But Paul Arriola, more so even than Nima Tuamasi, but they both did it. It's effectively, it's a back four, and then when they have the ball, they sit in that four, and the other four guys sit back on top of them in a four. And even occasionally the other side, outside midfielder, Dante Seeley when it was him, or it can be Marco Farfan, it can be whoever, it can be Bernie Kamungo. They'll drop back almost into a five. But when they get the ball and go forward, Paul then adventures forward, and Paul's a very smart player and can read the game well, and he's overlapping in two different ways. He's overlapping outside, getting up into the front end of the formation, playing right back effectively like a wing back should actually be played. He's playing right back like a wing back. And then the other person that's flexing is usually Siki and Sebling, who's flexing from the central to the outside, depending on whether he's playing as a defender or a central player. So this shape is constantly fluid. And if you, in any given moment in the game, you look at it and you'll go, oh, it's a 3-4-3. And then the next game, he'll have inverted the front line because now it's Musa and Farrington. So, oh, now it's a 3-5-2. And then you turn around and you go, wait, that's a flat back four. And so that sort of evolution of tactics and that modern fluidity of tactics and about coverage of spaces is really nice to see. That's a very modern tactic, very modern ability that requires relatively smart players. To watch them do it better under Luxane than they did under Nico. It's not exactly the same as Nico did it. Nico probably didn't do it very much because he was so rigidly defensive about their shape. But Luxane's given them this freedom. And so I'm watching it happen at a much higher level of play. And it's being triggered by Paul Arriola, who's, as I mentioned, a very intelligent player. And apparently so is Siki and Sebling. We never really saw this out of him. I didn't, over the time when he was under Nico, but whatever he's doing under that Peter Luxane's doing with him is really working because that guy's playing the best soccer he's played here too. And a lot of it has to do with the ability of Iramandi and Leggett behind him to pass and find him when he's moving in and out. And you can look at the other side and watch Bernie Kamungo not be able to do that and see the difference between those two players right at the minute.
Dan, do you have any other observations about what Peter is doing with his team?
Not really. I think Buzz just put it perfect.
Okay.
Playing the kids, that's nice.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, look, I think in my observation, Buzz, is that a lot of this is guys are just playing better, connecting passes, doing some of the basic stuff that they just weren't doing under Estevez for whatever reason. Now, I don't know how much of this is coach's bounce. I don't know how much of this is just a different kind of vibe in the room and people are paying attention or caring more. I don't know what it is, but the team is more entertaining and fun to watch, and maybe that is the base of it. I don't know how long this carries on for. I don't know how sustainable it is, but it is more fun. How about that?
Yeah, I think it's possible that some of it was the overly defensive rigidity that Coach Nico Estevez wanted, made people play relatively conservative, play to not make a mistake. I'm not going to say they play with fear, but that's not quite the same thing. But if you play not to make a mistake, when you do make a mistake, you panic, you get in trouble. Maybe you don't try and be creative. And Luxane's freed them up and given them the ability to try things. And he's even talked about that. He's talked about, I want my guys free to try things. And
right.
Within a week or two, Paul Arriola was tweeting things like, hey, thank you for believing us and making us believe in ourselves again and things like that. And really sometimes, and you said like, hey, everyone's just playing better. Sometimes really all it takes is some self-belief, and some belief put into you by a higher power. In this case, it's your new coach. Sometimes that gives you the coach bounce, and sometimes you pick up on it and take it. And because I think the coach bounce is over, but I do think that the belief is not over, that he's made them believe they can play. Because how often did we talk about like they're just being outplayed? Even when they would win a game, we'd be like, they won, but they got outplayed. But that's no longer the case. Now we're seeing games where either the whole game or big chunks of the game, they're outplaying people. Now, they still are not the greatest team in the league, so they still have letdowns. They still have road problems. They still have early game problems. They still have letdowns, but they don't have entire game letdowns like they perhaps used to.
So the word that the players are using is freedom. They're throwing that around, having the freedom to try things, to kind of veer out of position slightly, but to be trusted to still maintain their roles. I think Siki, a couple other players have talked a lot about the added verticality, something that maybe Nico discouraged slightly. They've been talking about certain players getting beyond the halfway line. So yeah, I mean that sort of stuff that does definitely contribute to a new coach bounce. But if that's the new style, if that's the new mantra, and that's that meshes way more with what Lucci wanted to do, with what Oscar wanted to do, what we've known FC Dallas to be.
So after this point, and I know we haven't talked specifically about either of the two games, the league games, the Portland game and the Kansas City game, but if I'm doing my math right, since Peter has taken over, he's essentially gone 500 pace. But his team has scored 14 goals and given up 12 goals. What I don't know, and I probably should have looked at this before I started asking questions, is have they really moved anywhere in the standings?
No. No, they're effectively still 11th. They've been in 11th basically for this late in the season. It's very difficult to move up or down. Like the gap to the team above them is like 8 points. So they would have to go on like a 3 or 4 game win streak to catch that team. And this is the ridiculousness of like the idea that those are enough time to make the playoffs. No, you're out of your mind. Like right. Once you're buried that deep, it's like you have to start playing at a clip that is ridiculous in order to get into the top half, and other people have to not play really well. And like you watched on the game on Sunday, or people that watched the game on Sunday would have seen that Sporting Kansas City is looking a little brighter too, and they're the team right behind you, right? So everybody gets better over the back half of the season. So it's what it would take to get in and what it would take to catch somebody at this point is not really realistic.
Right. And I think the takeaway for me is that really all this is about at this point for us as fans is aesthetics and entertainment. Because the team isn't it's playing better in some ways, but it's not playing better in others. It's giving up a ton of goals in this stretch. It scored a ton of goals, but it's not affecting where it's sitting in the record or the stands. It's not really effectively changing its opportunity to make the playoffs. So this is really just more of a feel good thing for us as fans more than anything else, than it actually Peter making this a better team.
Yeah, I mean the roster's still the roster. You can't turn it over this quickly. You can make a run at the cup, you can put some things in the league cup, but here's the saving grace though. Here's the thing that's like, okay, what's the moonshot that could make this happen? And that's the fact that the next two, I'm not trying to get too far ahead here, but the next 2 games are home games, and then they go to New England, who stinks, right? They're terrible. Mm-hmm. Well, then you got Leagues Cup. So from July 20th to August 20th, you're not playing league games. You have League Cup. You don't have regular games. So in that window, you're going to get Jesus Ferreira back, Liam Frazier back, Patterson Delgado's going to come back, maybe Alan Velasco's going to come back, maybe Giovanni Jesus is going to come back. Okay, you add those 5 guys, plus you go into the window and get something, maybe, hopefully. So in some ways, you might quote unquote add 6 guys of a high caliber to your roster, and you're going to have 9 games left after this, if my quick, real fast math is correct. You won't have a lot of home games because you'll burn 2 home games before you go, but you'll still have 9 to play. And so then you can talk about ridiculousness when you add 7 players of a high caliber. Well, maybe not Liam Fraser's not high caliber, but the other guys are all of a high caliber. So you can talk pipe dreams, and you can sell some tickets and get all excited about that, perhaps. But the math is still really, really difficult, even if, but at the end of the day, though, when they gave Peter the chance to win this job and they defined success as making the playoffs be a bare minimum, that's not really a fair thing to ask given the point deficit. But if you can turn it into above 500 soccer with the roster you have, because remember they said it's a playoff roster. Okay, look, I'm above 500. If I'd have been there all year, we'd have made the playoffs. Or look what the run I've made in the cup. Or look what I mean, that's what this coach can say this season is about in terms of trying to win in a shortened window and why it still matters for him and for them. Even if we can sit out here on the outside and go, keep your realistic expectations in check, because realistically it's not a thing, but we can dream. And we can get some guys back and we can get excited and we can see what we have and have fun with it,
One of the other players we haven't talked about yet that I think, at least based on what I've watched in the last few games, that I'm really curious about your opinion of, Buzz, and Dan too, is what in the hell is going on with Nkosi Tafari?
His mindset is clearly different. He's playing.
Let me just because he is a very clear reflection of this team, where he has moments where he is playing out of his mind, aggressive, playing hard, getting stuck in, running forward, and then he has some of the. In the last few weeks, the few games, had some real boneheaded moments that have cost the team.
Yeah, I think that that's a player that Coach Peter Luxane has said to him. Be yourself, be aggressive, be attacking. Because we see Ibeagha is physical, but he is not nearly, while he's relatively aggressive, he's not nearly aggressive as Nkosi. And Nkosi's clearly changed things in the way he's playing. He, too, has also bought into this idea of freedom clearly. The question is, is it better or worse? I think that he plays better when he is attacking mentally. Now, it doesn't have to be attacking soccer, he doesn't have to be at the front line, but you can attack in a defensive posture, right?
He's up a lot, though.
Sure, but even as a defender, you can be aggressive and physically attack the play, and so I think I'm willing to put up with a little bit of those boneheaded moments because of those plays where he runs it down from 50 yards away and catches up and wins the ball away, or scores a goal off of a corner that he's up for. So there's a trade-off there, and obviously him not being worth $80 million is because of some of those boneheaded moments, or because of the lack of cultured feet, or because of, there's lots of reasons why. These guys are all in MLS for a reason. But I think he plays so much better when I've used this phrase a lot, when he's on the front foot, when he's the protagonist and not just sitting there waiting. That was a big Oscar thing, right? Be the protagonist. And so I think that's what he's doing, and I'm okay with it. And that's why in my thing about the next window, I talked about getting a center back that was more of a game reader, sitter in place, defensive first, that can cover up some of those aggressiveness out of Nkosi or Ibeagha if you're rotating, going forward. So, I think with the right player next to him, it'll fit and work a little bit better than it does right now, because Ibeagha is not the right player for that matchup. It's okay, but it's not great. But I'm willing to live with some Nkosi-isms because then I get Nkosi scoring corners and talking trash to the stands and all that fun stuff.
The header he scored against Portland was fantastic.
It's nice.
Yeah, it was really,
that was a scripted play too. The whole team went front post and he spun and rotated out in a clearly set up play. And one of the post game quotes was from Leggett. I think it was whoever took that corner. I think it was Leggett, talking about how much they love that play. He and Nkosi do, because they get to run it, run it training and had it ready to go and knew it would work.
Yeah, well, back-to-back 3-2 games, a win and a loss, is maybe the best example of what we're getting out of this Peter Luxane-run club, just because it's the good and the bad of everything, that whatever he's doing or whatever he's talked them into doing is fun and entertaining, but it also comes, the goal they gave up to lose the game against Kansas City was really unfortunate. And man, I feel for Alaramendi, who is not young. He's playing. He started again tonight in this Open Cup game, and looks like he's probably going to play the entire game. That'll be 3 straight 90-minute games he's put out, and that's not easy on a guy of his age. And on that last goal, he got beaten initially on that, and I hope they're not wearing that dude out if they're trying to make any kind of run this season.
It's possible they might be, but Paul Arriola in that game was playing as a higher player, and he did not track Memo Rodriguez of all people on that run.
No, he didn't.
yeah,
There was a lot
so-
of. I mean,
yeah.
Larramendi was not singularly at fault. There was a lot of people that.
There was yeah.
It was a sequence of events.
Well, the bigger issue with those last two games is that both of those games, Dallas has given up early goals. To Portland, they give up an early goal, and to St. Louis, Luxane said that he thought that they started well for like the first 10 minutes, but their first goal came at 11, and then they scored again at like 20. Like the first half of both the Portland game and the Seattle game, the first half was bad. So that's a trend. It's like, he's going into the locker room and he's giving speeches and he's throwing trash cans. I mean, I don't know that for sure, but that kind of thing. And they come out on fire. So like, that's one of the trends to keep an eye on is like, are they continuing to start flat? And we watched the first half of this game at Kansas City again in the Open Cup. And that was a pretty flat first half, So I don't know that that's the end all beat all, but because this club has a tendency this season to score all their goals in the second half. It's something like, 26 of their 30 goals that come in the second half or something ridiculous. I don't have it right in front of me, but it's something like that. So that's the thing to watch. And the other thing to watch is the poor shooting efficiency. Since Jesus went out, their shot on goal ratio has really skyrocketed in terms of it's like 12-3 all the time now, which is not good. This seems not good when it has that kind of poor shooting efficiency. Now, it can't just be Jesus. I mean, that's probably a big part of it because he's such a clinical on-target finisher. But, other guys, too, are just being more, probably free and just blasting it from other places and being less meticulous about trying to develop really good shots in tight.
Running through some of the other players that we've seen in the last couple of weeks, Thomas Pondega and Tariq Scott, or did he go back to Tarek Scott? Do we know? What's the official?
Dan, you were there. It's Tyrek, isn't it?
Tyrek, yeah.
Tyrek Scott. Okay.
Yeah. It's changed twice. That's why he's 18. That's fine.
I know.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell it for those who are not familiar with the young man? Why don't you share everybody your impressions and knowings of him?
All right. First, shout out Nolan Norris, 56 minutes with no yellow card. Baby steps.
Dennis the Menace.
Dennis the Menace. Oh, so Thomas Pondeka is a central midfield player. He originally was a U.S. futsal national team player, and he's one of these guys that the team says they found at open trout, and I kind of scoff at that because he played at high school here in town, and he was on the national futsal team. So it's not like he was unheard of. He played, MASL kind of stuff a little bit. So it's not like I think he got invited to the tryout.
Don't ruin the narrative, Buzz.
Well, come on.
I was at his first North Texas game. I'm pretty sure, they invited him along so that they could, get the standard for the actual open trialists.
Well, exactly. So he played in his first season at North Texas. They played him as a wing, and he was terrible. So 80% of the season was over, and I was like, okay, this kid sucks. See you later at the end of the year, kid. And then it was when John Gall took over, roughly, maybe 5 or 6 games left in the season. They put him on inside in the middle, and the kid came alive, and he was fantastic. He's not a pure 10. He's more of this free 8 kind of style player that can play kind of two ways. And he looks great for the last 6 or 7 games in that season. And then they ended up signing him. So he's been playing again. He was injured for the first third of the North Texas season this year. And then he got healthy and came back and played really well. And that's why Luxane has called him back up to the first team. Shortage of bodies in a particular position he plays, but he played pretty well down there. Now his first couple of games here have not been great. He's in over his head clearly, but that's how this goes. You bring him up, you give him a look, give him a little run out, they get a taste, they go, oh man, I got to work, and they go back and they keep working and they get better. So hopefully that will happen with him. He's 22, 23. He's a little bit older. He's you have to think of him like a college draft pick. Think of him as Siki coming out of Oregon State. Think of him that way, and that'll help you understand where he should be in his projection.
Okay.
Now Tyrek Scott is homegrown out of the academy, 18 years old. For the last 3 years he was in the academy, he was by far the most dangerous and prolific goal scorer they had. He was the danger player in the academy for 3 seasons. Phenomenal athlete. He runs stylistically Eddie Johnson or Jeff Cunningham, where his feet kind of skate along the ground. You know that style I'm talking about? Josie Alto ran like that too. That low to the ground with his feet, kind of shimmying almost, it looks like, as he runs, but he's running right past people. He's that kind of vertical forward. He can play as a wing or a 9 and plays very vertical, and he's scoring a bunch of goals with North Texas Soccer Club. So he got a chance to get some minutes. He looked pretty decent in that short run out. That was nice. You know, he's the one that blew out the ACL MCL combo last year and was out the whole year. So this is even his recovery year. You really shouldn't have had high expectations. And he's looking really good. He's leading North Texas in scoring, and he's in the top 10, or he was in the top 10 until he got called up for MLS Next Pro. So there's some exciting young prospects who are up and getting some minutes finally, partially due to the lack of people available, but also because Luxand is a little more willing to play the kids than Nico Steves was.
Well, I'm trying. Okay, so I feel like I've been trying to figure out where to squeeze this in here, because we probably should have started with this, because looming over us like the sword of Damocles is the news that, and as you smartly said on Twitter yesterday, Buzz, this has been coming, which is that Martin Paes, the guy that has been holding this thing together as best he can, has some suitors in the summer window, and specifically Empoli in Italy is talking to the club about getting his papers. Yeah,
we're not. I'm certainly not privy to the inside details on this. What was reported was that they were so interested in him that there was going to be some kind of meeting today. Now, because it's not in English and the Google Translate is probably not flawless, I could not tell if the meeting was with Paes' agent or Paes himself or with FC Dallas. The idea was to get the framework for like what it might take to get him from FC Dallas. And he's their number one target for their goalkeeper. They let 2 goalkeepers leave, and he's their number one target replacement. They have a younger kid they're interested in too, but Paes is their guy that they want. So, Dan, go ahead. If you got something, jump in.
Yeah, supposedly there's been some contact, and they're talking about a loan with an option to buy initially.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, the reason why I said on Twitter that frankly it's inevitable is the guy has been playing absolutely phenomenal soccer and keeping Dallas in games they didn't have any business being in. And they paid $1 million to get him. If you remember, Paes was originally on a loan deal, and he hit a requirement. I think it was a games played requirement that automatically kicked in his buy. And I went and looked on the internet today, and everywhere I can find it, it says it was $1 million or €1 million, one or the other. The difference doesn't matter.
Right.
So, have that in the back of your head. Okay, what would we want in order to sell him? But also consider that Jimmy Maurer is effectively pretty much done. He just didn't retire because he was going to do this combo front office thing for them to help them out so they could send Antonio Carrera on loan. Antonio's 20. So, are you ready to hand him the keys to the boat here for the back end of this season if he's on loan, or does Jimmy play the back end of this season and then Antonio next year? There will be questions that will have to be asked about the keeper situation, and you have to include that in your calculation of, okay, how much do I need from them in order to be willing to let Paes go? The back end of this season, you probably don't care almost. Like, you want some money, sure, but like, is it going to kill you that you don't have Paes when you're pretty much done anyway? And so then the question is, okay, what would the buy be for me to give up on Paes? Well, how good is Antonio Carrera? And that's their internal evaluation. So, I think it probably takes north of $3 million, in my opinion, before Dallas is like, sure, you can have him.
Wow, that low, really?
Yeah. Well, they only paid $1 million to get him. And it'll depend on how much, how long is his contract remaining, right? That's always a factor in it. Does he want to go or not? How much money are they offering him? It's all a factor. Keep in mind,
what's he making here? Do we remember?
He's on 325. With the bonuses up to like 400, which is not
a lot. No,
right? So he's under contract through 2026. So with some options, so they have the long contract to say if they wanted to, they could say no. And okay, if you want him, you got to pay. It's not like he's free in December, right? So, if they're offering him $1 million a year instead of $300,000 a year, I mean, can you stop that? So.
No, and you also have to remember his girlfriend is the supermodel that lives over in Europe. He wants to I would assume he wants to be closer to her. And don't forget about the Indonesia. Like how much closer he is to Indonesia too. So
well, he certainly seems to love Dallas. He's definitely embraced this city, but at the same time, there's amount of money on the table for him and where it is and all that stuff.
Well, and the Hunts, to their credit or discredit, I don't know how I feel about this. They've also been the kind of ownership that has been very willing to say, hey, if a guy doesn't want to be here and has a better opportunity, let him go.
Especially if you can flip him for a couple million, over the course of 2 seasons and make a couple extra million back on the back end of the deal. That's not, and I'm sure FC Dallas, people who they are, they'll throw in a percentage, a sell on percentage like they always want. Even though he's not their academy guy, he's still a guy that they helped rebuild, take the next step in his career. It also helps their reputation as being a club that you can take a stepping stone with. They've always, people from South America and maybe not Brazil or Argentina, but a lot of other South American countries have always considered that to be the case with Dallas. Well, what about European guys now? You can now sell to European guys that didn't get their work out their very first thing to that big leap. Oh, come here for a little bit. MLS is now a big stage and we sell, so it's all part of their program that they're under with, the reason they have Zanata is the buying and the selling, not the winning of trophies. So, and we're probably going to lose this guy eventually anyway, because he's too good, and not American. So that's part of it.
Well, I got to say, if the trade-off is a young guy like Carrera getting in goal, I'm kind of up for that because I don't have any anticipation for the season anyway. So if they want to finish the season with him, I think I'd be fine with that. It'd be fun to watch him play in goal.
One of the things I said about Antonio, I think today, was that, right today, of course, he's nowhere near as good as Martin Paes is, but he was the number 2 choice for the U20 team. And you would expect that a guy that well thought of at the U20 age group, that's not U15, that's U20, that over the next 5 or 6 years, that guy's probably going to be really good. Maybe he's not really good today, but this is how this works. Do they need something in between? Possibly. Maybe he's not quite ready to be the first team guy. I mean, Drew Keyshawn's one of the best goalkeeper coaches in the league. So if he thinks Antonio's ready, then I think Antonio's ready. If I had to win a game today, would he be my first choice for the first team? No, of course not. Paes would be, but that doesn't mean at some point eventually you got to play the kids to find out if they can hack it. And that means eventually you got to put Antonio in games at that level. Because at North Texas, he was dominating North Texas last year. The reason why they did a loan for him this year was because playing at North Texas wasn't going to do him any good anymore. They wanted to challenge his, space, put him out on an island by himself, away from his family, away from the club, and make him grow and mature. And hopefully that has happened, and hopefully we'll get a taste of him soon and find out before they sell Paes.
Well, didn't Antonio's brother just sign a deal with a Liga MX team?
Toluca, yeah. He's moving from, I don't know whether it's a loan or a sale. He's moving from Holston Kiel to Toluca.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, things happen in the Carrera family.
Yeah, for sure.
Paying off.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know where I put that. I mean, I have really torn feelings about that. It would be great to see Paes get an opportunity to move to bigger and better things, but he's had such a stellar season, and actually 2 seasons because he was great last year too. Losing him now would really suck, but I think probably everybody wins in that deal if they can get the right deal on the table.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, this roster needs a fair bit of pieces to really get to where you're competing at the top of the league, and if you just have to add goalkeeper to that list, so be it. We ought to be able to come up with American goalkeepers that are pretty good. Maybe they found Jimmy Maurer, who was pretty good for a couple of years, and Antonio should be pretty good. And if not now, in a couple of years, they had Eyestone, who they missed on, but he would have been pretty good. Michael Colodey's doing great things with North Texas right now, which makes you feel good about him being a second or third at some point down the line. So, I have great confidence actually in the FC Dallas keeper coach and their keeper evaluation process. Mm-hmm. There's another academy kid coming through that looks pretty good at the 17s. So we've moved up to the 19s this year. So I'm not in panic mode about losing Martin Paes. I think enough of Antonio Carrera that at some point I'm ready to start him. It may not be today, but it may have to be today. We're about to find out. There's no reason why Jimmy Maurer couldn't finish this season easily too. I mean, that would be fine. Or if you sell in Paes, maybe you can find somebody else that's like that. I mean, they have this European scout now. They found him in the first place. Somebody else make it pop up.
Yeah, that would be a weird way to divide the season. Would be like losing him after. All right. We'll see how that plays out. When does the window open for that to happen?
Well, the outbound would be based on whatever the Italian season window is. I don't know what that is. I know the MLS one is the 18th, but that's for inbound MLS players. Okay. Theirs is probably already open, I would think, actually. Dan, do you know when the European window's mostly opened?
I want to say it should be already open, like you say.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the things about when we've talked about like why hasn't Dallas announced something, because like most of those teams and whose seasons all ended started making their moves of getting rid of guys. So there should be a bunch of guys that are out there free right now or willing to be moved from their teams right now. And we see MLS teams signing these pre-contracts and these announced players that aren't active until the 18th or whatever. And we don't hear anything from Dallas. And it's one of the reasons why we're nervous that, okay, you guys have had all season to line up something. Why is there not something ready to go? Maybe there is. Maybe we just don't know about it, which is very possible, of course.
And that leads me to something you did on your Discord today, which was take a poll of your Discord subscribers all guessing how many players Dallas will sign in this particular window. Buzz, what was the winning number?
One. One was the winning number. Yeah.
One is the loneliest number.
Yeah, and 0 got votes. People were like, no, they're not getting anybody.
I was really torn between 0 and 1, Buzz. I got to be honest with you.
I was too.
I picked 1.
Yeah, I did 1 also. I think there'll be 1. It might not be somebody exciting, but I think there'll be at least 1 because they have an open roster spot. So it makes, and they have an open international spot, and they have an open U22 initiative, which they shouldn't use, by the way. You should not use that because you might need it for Delgado. But, they still have an open roster spot, and if you're about to lose your keeper, then maybe that changes everything again anyway. So we'll see. It's a fluid process, Peter. Yeah.
So you're not making predictions?
No, I'm not making predictions.
You don't have a gut feeling?
Oh, about what moves they're going to make?
Yeah.
Oh, I wrote a thing about that. I wrote a strategy for that.
That was why I asked you.
Yeah, I didn't realize that's what you were leading up to. Well, that wasn't a prediction. That's a suggestion.
Right. Okay.
Right. I mean, listen, you, me, Dan, every national writer out there in the world says Dallas needs a center back. It's fundamentally true that they've needed a center back. They've needed one for like 3 or 4 years. My suggestion was somebody like Reto Ziegler, except not to Reto Ziegler. He's now 40 or whatever. Somebody in their late 20s that has a style similar to Reto Ziegler had. That would be lovely. That's the kind of player that they need, and probably an international, left-footed, smart game reader, intelligent, experienced, someone that can be a good balance to Nkosi Tafari. Nkosi deserves a frontline center back to be next to him, and you want to keep Ibiaga too, because you occasionally want to go 3 at the back. So, or have a good rotational guy you can bring in, but that's the main thing. And then the other thing I wrote was that, they don't need to replace Paxton because they have a Paxton replacement. His name is Sebastian Lletget. Lletget is playing fantastic. He's doing everything that Paxton was doing. So there's no need to go out and do something crazy and reckon your cap for 2025 trying to replace a guy, that's going to come back probably anyway. So just stick pat with Lletget and be content with that. If you absolutely 100% are like, okay, I need a central midfielder body, just go sign Diego Garcia from North Texas. He's going to be probably signed this winter anyway, but they don't even need to do that. If you really needed a guy for 1 game, just do an emergency signing or just let Pondeka play again or let Norris play again. There's no reason to force something into your roster. Paxton's on 900,000. So like, if you're going to replace that, you need another player of a similar sort of salary. Well, that's what Lletget is. So there's no reason to go get somebody else. Just let Lletget do it. It's fine.
Now to the Open Cup, where we are editing this in because obviously it ended well after we recorded the rest of this podcast. And here we are on Thursday morning talking about Dallas losing and now out of the Open Cup after going to added time and losing to Kansas City. 2-1, Buzz. Not good.
Yeah, not good. There are some positives in this game, but there's definitely some negatives too. It's a really good hallmark actually of the entire season for FC Dallas. On the positive front, that we've been talking about this efficiency of shooting, and they return to the more of a 50% kind of mark, which is really excellent. They ended up being 17 shots with 8 on goal. That's pretty quality. But then the other side of that coin was Melia, the Kansas City keeper, did a pause and had 6 saves and really put them in the bind in terms of converting. And there were Bernie Kamingo got in on him maybe 3 times and probably could have scored in there if he had a right foot. And Sebastian Lletget was crashing the box pretty well, and he had 2 really nice opportunities that Melia saved in a pretty good fashion. They were not bad shots by Lletget by any means, and Dallas did end up scoring on a good finish by Petr Musa. But sometimes you just have games like this where the opposition keeper does really well, and on the other side of the coin is that there are some breakdowns, of course, that happen on things that have been breakdowns lately, which is these crosses into the box. And again, a goal off a corner, which is only the third of the year, but happened, twice before this very recently. It's a very new problem that they're having problems with corners. So something has changed in that capacity. I don't know what it is. It's just general, as the game went on, Peter, we've talked about how big parts of this spine are just really too old. And I've raised the concerns about the guys not playing 90 minutes enough. And then when you got to go 120, Dallas really started to tire in extra time, and they really struggled to compete. And the funny part is that Yaramendi was the one that was actually doing more work and still competing the longest, because we know he's one of the fittest guys on the team. And some of the young guys were the ones that were crapping out because they just couldn't handle it or had expended too much energy. So microcosm of the season, and a tough one for fans, because that pretty much kills the most of the good chances Dallas had to do something this year.
Well, a couple of observations from this. Let me speak to the game itself. The reality is that this is 2 non-playoff teams just kind of pounding each other on the head. The first 2 goals, just bad defending by both teams, switching off, leaving players open that shouldn't be open. I mean, these are not good MLS teams, and so it is kind of an even keel battle both ways, and it just was a little bit of luck, that Kansas City was able to convert their one opportunity where Dallas missed theirs. So I don't know how much that tells you. What I do think on a larger observation is that what we are seeing under Peter Luxane, is that what is being revealed are the reasons why Nico had this team played in such a controlled and defensive manner. Because since he has left this team is bleeding goals at a unbelievable rate. If you go back and look at how many goals they've given up, I think they've given up now 13 goals in, is it 6 games, I think, at this point, or 7 games?
Oh, I didn't count, but something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and I think when you say, Buzz, I don't know what's changed. I think what's changed is the removal of Nico's overly defensive and manner of playing, which was very, very protective of his belief that if I let go of the reins too much of this, we're just going to leak goals left and right, and I don't believe we can score enough goals to make up the difference. And I think that's what this is. This, along with the 2-3-2 games back to back, I think are really, really perfect reflections of the difference between what is going on underneath Peter and what was going on underneath Nico.
No, you're exactly correct. That's what has happened in terms of the macro goals. I was specifically referring to the goals off corners. When you don't give up any goals off corners all year, and then all of a sudden you give up 3 of those in a week and a half, something changed in terms of the defensive marking or whoever's diagnosing corners. Something changed in terms of corner goals specifically. But you're 100% correct that this is exactly why Nico was playing this incredibly defensive system. He didn't believe enough in the loosey-goosey sort of defending methodology. He was 100% into a rigid, structured system, and it was because of the fact that he knew he had defensive deficiencies. Martin Paes in that kind of system is capable of keeping you in games and giving you some ties and wins. The corollary argument would be, well, getting a bunch of ties doesn't help you any. Right. At some point you have to win games. And so Luxane has gone, unsurprisingly, when a guy gets fired, you go the other way. You try something different. And so he's loosened the reins. And you're right, they are bleeding goals at a pretty prolific rate. I mean, even the wins, like the Minnesota game is 5-3 Seattle's a loss, but it's 3-2. The only game they were tight was in Cincinnati, but remember Cincinnati was missing a bunch of players. They gave up 2 to Portland, 3 to Kansas City, 2 to Kansas City. That's a pretty high rate of goal capitulation. It becomes one of the things we've said about it though is that like it's more fun to at least be scoring goals and competing. But again, like the way things have changed under Peter. Accentuates the fact that what we've been saying all along, that there are deficiencies with this team, that you can't play open and free and try and outplay people and not give up goals. Those two things won't work. You can look at teams at the top of the conference. Even just look at FC Cincinnati, right? They lost 2 center backs that are better than the center backs Dallas has, and they ran out there with reserve center backs. I think they even lost their 3rd best center back too. And then they still held Dallas to just 1 goal in that game because they're a good defensive team across the board. And they have multiple players that can play this positions at a level higher than everybody Dallas has, except maybe Nicosi. And we've talked about how Nicosi's playing this very aggressive method and is willing to accept a certain amount of mistakes. So I think under Luxane, this is the way it's going to be. Unless he changes his ways, we're just going to see a lot of high scoring games, a lot of free games. That doesn't mean that it's good soccer, but it's a lot more entertaining soccer for sure.
Well, I agree of all of that, but it's also infinitely predictable. This is all kind of what we've been talking about, even leading up to Esteves' sacking, which was, look, unless they're bringing in a particular type of manager, the person that's going to be here is only going to be able to do so much with so little, and that's kind of what we're seeing the results of.
Yeah, I think I've said things like, if you bring in a good manager in this league, that you could swing, 3 or 4, maybe even 5 places in the standings, but you can't go from being FC Dallas to being LAFC with the same set of players, right? You just can't do it. Like LAFC, just go look at their roster and look at the money spend they do. Look at what Atlanta's about to do with they've just sold like $50 million worth of players and they're going to go turn that thing over. There's some teams that are at the top of this league. I mean, go compare FC Cincinnati's roster when healthy to FC Dallas's. It's a different caliber. A manager can come in and can take you. And I've said this about European teams too. If you're in the top 6 in England, you can change your manager and you can go from 3rd to 1st, or you can go from 6th to 3rd, but you can't go from 20th to 3rd without spending $250 million. And the equivalent of that in MLS is that this FC Dallas roster right now needs more talent, and it certainly needs to be healthier talent. And I don't know that the manager changes whatever's going on with their health issues that are causing, again, all these injuries in midfield piling up. It's all the same position, which is the weird part, is it's all the midfielders. It's not the strikers that are going down. It's not the center backs that are going down. It says something about the way the team plays, perhaps, or it says something about their system, or I don't know what it says. So, they need to evaluate that across the board to figure out what's going on with that. And the manager's not changing that. So, it is what it is for the rest of this season, and we have to evaluate Luxane on what he's doing, and hopefully the club is too. And the thing about Luxane is that even if he does a good job, you never know what other candidate might come out there. Not to be stupid, but like if Jurgen Klopp calls and goes, "Hey, I want to coach FC Dallas," you think Luxane has a shot after that? No, I mean that's a crazy example. But that kind of thing could happen to him. Even if he has a good season, there still could be some candidate that makes them go, "Oh, Peter, we love you, man, but so-and-so called,"
Yeah, and this is probably not the time to get into it. But this is where I get really frustrated, because I think historically we know where this thing is going and where this thing is headed in terms of how they're going to end up, how they're going to hire. Because history just tells us this is the type of hire the Hunts make for this club. They've hired 8 managers, and only one of them has had any MLS head coaching experience. One of them, and only 2 of the 8 outside of that one had any head coaching experience at all prior to at any level. Prior to taking the Dallas job. So I think I know the type of person they're going to hire.
Of course.
And the irony of this is that if in fact Dallas had brought in somebody with a significant resume and a lot of experience, I would make the argument that what they would have done is they probably would have gone on a path similar to Nico. They would have assessed the situation, recognized the problems, and what you would have ended up with is probably something not dissimilar to Nico Estevez' system of focusing on keeping other teams from scoring on you. And trying to figure out the small little things you can do to maximize the few opportunities you actually create. That's what I think would have happened if they had hired a really, really experienced coach.
I mean, I think even a coach like Luke Sain might have done that if he wasn't coming on the heels of a guy that got fired for doing that. You know what I mean? Like if Peter didn't have this mandate of like, we got to score more goals, he might have come to the same conclusion.
Right.
He was part of that staff.
But right. No, you're right. Yeah. But isn't that the difference between hiring a guy that is like just trying to win a gig versus a guy that actually knows what he's doing and has some gravitas and can point to Dan Hunt and go, damn, this team is not very good. If you want to have any chance, you've got to do it this way.
Well, it's certainly that. It's also certainly a guy who's the interim and has to win it to get it.
Right.
And it's not like isn't just getting the job through an interview. Because like when you hire a coach through the interview process, whoever the next full-time coach is, that guy's not going to be judged on a month and a half, not going to be judged on 12 games. He's going to be judged on, he's going to get a whole cycle, 2-3 seasons. And if 3 seasons in, it's not good, then it's like they'll make a change like Nico has right here or like Lucci has right here. And the other problem, of course, is, and not to go too deep on hiring at this point, is that you still have a front office that it consisted of Zanata and another TD they brought in and all these other people. Sometimes a big, huge name won't go into a situation like that because they want either full control themselves or they want their guy. Like, I'm going to bring in my player guy and we're going to do this, And so like it's a complicated setup in terms of like how you're going to go forward and what kind of guys you can get. But it doesn't change the fact that you're 100% right. And I think we've said this from the beginning of this season, that one of the reasons Nico did what he did was because we think the roster was so deficient. And we've talked over and over and over again about how, yes, the team was low in goals given up, but it was because of the system and it was because of the goalkeeper, not because of the great defensive back five, And so I think any coach is going to come to that same conclusion. Those people are a lot smarter about soccer than you and I are, and we can see it, So I think at this point the takeaway has to be with like, okay, the best path for salvaging the season is over with the Open Cup out. So that leaves you Leagues Cup, which is a tough one. Now, their 2 games are winnable, so they can probably get out of their group because Juarez is not that great. They just started their season. St. Louis is not doing very well, except that you got to go to St. Louis, and Dallas has never won a game all year. So problematic.
Road game all year.
Road game, I'm sorry, yes. Sorry. Road game all year, so that's...
It's not that bad, Buzz.
Yeah, so it's not... Only one team gets out of the group, if I remember it correctly, so it's not... it's a bit of a crapshoot that you're going to be able to get anything out of the Leagues Cup, which leaves you just these 12 remaining regular season games, of which you probably need to win 7. And so there's a diminishing return when guys are going to realize time is running out. So now I'm playing to get another job when I'm either playing for tape for the next coach coming in. I'm playing for Luke Sain if he's the next coach. I'm playing for my next stop if I'm going to get cut by this team. Or other guys will be like, you know what, I'm 30 and I'm done after this. I'm 35 and I'm done after this. So, it's going to be a mixed bag of what kind of performances you get as the season wanes on an interim coach. It's going to be tough for the team to continue to put out super positive results and keep competing, and hopefully at the very least they'll be entertaining.
Well, it does a couple of things before we move on to what's coming up in the next couple of weeks. One, it does beg the question, do they make the decision to shut down Jesus, depending on what this injury situation is for the season?
Yeah,
2, related, do they consider just calling it for Velasco and or Giovanni Jesus, in their health situations? Like, why risk 2025 on 2 guys coming back? I mean, I don't know what their recovery situation is, but you certainly, the point being is you don't need to rush them back to try to salvage a season that is unsalvageable. Right?
Yeah, that's totally fair. A couple of those guys are in shorter windows, and we'll talk about some of them in terms of going forward in the next couple of games, but that's a really good question about those other 2 dudes, and maybe Jesus as well, because of the long-term pain, that you're going to have to get through with those guys. That's a really interesting question. I hadn't thought about that. I'll have to dwell on that a little bit.
And then this is a completely unrelated observation, which is, turn on the game, Open Cup. It's a summer night. School isn't in effect. I know there was rain coming, but I was shocked at the poor attendance for this game in Kansas City. For Open Cup, after all of the noise about Open Cup and everybody's outrage over how much the Open Cup was at risk and everybody loves the Open Cup in this, the fact that you can turn on the Kansas City Dallas game and see, what is it, 30% full at Kansas City?
Yeah, they're having a really bad season. The funny thing about that is that Sporting and Seattle are the two teams that actually take the Open Cup seriously. They both won 4. And they're both they're 2 of the last 4 teams left. They're both trying to be the first team in MLS to win 5. You know, they both are very, very serious about the Open Cup, not just in terms of what they say, but what they actually do. And so then to see that kind of attendance at Sporting, where I've been at an Open Cup game there when the thing is packed out. So, you know, maybe they knew the weather was coming. Maybe it's their bad season. Or maybe it's the MLS's insistence on not marketing these games. I mean, like, you couldn't even tell there was a game last night on the front page of the MLS's website. You know, they buried those games in their setup, and they're hard to find on TV. And, you know, I fear for the future of the Open Cup, I honestly.
Well, this leads me to my other observation, which is, what must you feel like if you are a Sporting Kansas City fan? Because that is an organization that has been lauded for doing all the right things. We have spent so much time applauding and parading around the success story of Sporting Kansas City. But if you think Dallas's season is bad, they're actually 3 points behind Dallas on having played an extra game than Dallas. And you've got Peter Vermees kind of lording over all of this. And, you know, that's a roster of dudes very much like Dallas.
Yeah. I mean, imagine if they hadn't won that 6-point game, they'd be 9 points back at Dallas. And Dallas is terrible. Yeah, I mean, you know, Vermees is in a situation where I think he has nobody that says no to him. And if you watch them play, like the guys that have carried them for a long time, Russell and Polito are definitely in their fading part of their careers, right? That team needs a complete sort of teardown, just as Seattle and Portland did, and they are in the middle of and are being successful with, you know. So whether Dallas needs that same thing or not is hard to say. Some of their very best players are those guys in their 30s. Which stinks. It's definitely true that Dallas is too old, but you know, you watch Yarmini performing versus like Polito, who's running out there looking like he's a ghost of himself. You know, and you can see why they're in the situation they are in. Vermees is probably smart enough and has won enough titles that he'll get the chance to tear it down and rebuild it. But yeah, it's in a bad way.
Well, I think the point I'm trying to make is that for all of the criticism that we put on Dan Hunt and Clark Hunt for how they operate this thing, it doesn't mean just because you have an ownership group that does all of these other things right and builds an amazing stadium, puts an amazing atmosphere on the field, has won previous championships, et cetera, means that on any particular season you're going to be competitive, and or that you don't hold on to something that maybe you shouldn't hold on to for too long.
Yeah, I mean, in this business, you got to constantly be turning it over. You got to constantly be striving to get better. You can't sit on your hands, sit on your laurels, or you'll get passed by. And that's what happened to Dallas. That's what's happened to Kansas City.
Okay, now all that stuff's out of the way. Let's look forward. They've got 2 games in the between now and the next time we record one of these things. First off, home against the Galaxy, who are playing out of their mind good. And by the way, I thought looked really good when looked pretty good. When I saw them out in LA a month or so ago, Buzz. That's going to be a hard game.
Very difficult. You know, it is at your home, but, you know, as you mentioned, a lot of these guys for Dallas are playing a lot of games. You know, you have to consider, well, I would say you have to consider the long term of the season, but it may be that understanding is that you may not have to. But you also have to understand that there's a game against the Galaxy this weekend, and then there's another midweek game after that, which we'll do in a second. So you have to understand that, like, basically from now until Leagues Cup, basically, you're pretty much playing every 3 or 4 days. You're going to have a midweek game all the time. So you're going to have to continue to do some of this rotation that Luxane's been doing. So, you know, who might go against the Galaxy? You know, since you're coming off of the Cup game on Wednesday where you rolled out 100% like your best 11, this is as good as we can be. And then you're going to play again against the Galaxy, who are really, 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 really good. And then you're going to play again against Austin, who is good, but not as good as the Galaxy. So maybe you sacrifice a little bit this Saturday, 3 days later, and rotate in some guys, and then you could come back again next Wednesday with your full team. So how you bounce back and forth between that and balance that stuff is tough. Like Luke's saying, is theoretically trying to win all these games. Like, remember, they need 7 wins. So like, you got 2 home games here. You really need to win both of them. You pretty much got to win all your home games if you're going to have a chance at this thing, because you've not won a single road game this year. So, how you dial up 2 winning rosters against the Galaxy and Austin in back-to-back games is tough. I don't know that that's doable.
And what is the injury situation with everybody at this point?
Well, I looked at that, and Ferreira went out after the Seattle game. So this weekend will be 3 weeks, which was kind of the prognosis. So there's a chance that Ferreira could be back between those 2 games, maybe even for the first one, maybe for the second one. And then Frazier went out after the Cincinnati game. So he's just now going to be at 2 weeks, and his original thing was 2 to 3. So less likely that he'll be back. Delgado was a longer time frame. He won't. I don't expect him to be back anytime soon.
What's Delgado's injury?
I think it was a hip thing. They're putting like lower body and upper body on the injury report these days, which is kind of like whatever. But I feel like, if I remember correctly, Delgado's was like going to be a month or 2 out. So Delgado and Alan Velasco and Giovanni Jesus, we don't really know when any of those 3 guys will be back, other than it'll be before the end of the season. But Jesus and Liam Frazier could definitely be involved within the next couple of games if their recovery went as it was predicted to, which I don't know why it wouldn't. They're usually relatively knowledgeable about such things. The medical staff is, like, how long it's going to take. So, can you bring back one or both those guys to try and help relieve some of the pressure? Can you place a couple more kids? I mean, there's some opportunity here to get more kids in these games. So, it's an interesting question. Like, do I want to sacrifice one game or the other? Which game am I more likely to win? But honestly, you got to win both of them if you're going to give it a run. So I think Luxan will try and win every game he can, honestly. And how you do that is tough. Those are the tough questions.
Yeah. Galaxy and Austin back-to-back at home. Austin's a Wednesday game, so that will be interesting. Yeah, meaning I bring that up, meaning there won't be a ton of people traveling up from Austin, I doubt, for that game. It won't be like a big sellout. I mean, well, it'll technically be a sellout, but, won't be
Austin
has
has
eat out.
Yeah, Austin has 30 points, which is 7 points ahead of Dallas. That's only 2 wins better. They have 8 wins and Dallas has 6 wins. So given it's your home court, it's like, that's a game that you should have an expectation you're going to win. It's a team that's relatively close to you in the standings. They're going to be bad on the road. They only have 2 wins on the road, and Dallas has got 6 wins at home. So like that, that's balls in your court, balls in your favor. LA Galaxy, however, a third. They've got 5 road wins. So that game is very, very difficult. No matter which way you slice it, the Galaxy is going to be a very difficult chance to get a win there. You almost have to try and go. If you think you need both wins, and you really do, you almost have to put more weight on the Galaxy game and then try and hope that you can muddle through the Austin game, or you can just sacrifice the Galaxy completely, but that's not going to get you into the playoffs. So look, Saints got some tough calls to make because, the game after that is against New England, which is a winnable game, but it's on the road, but they're not very good. So like, you have to feel like, they've only got 4 wins at home. So like, maybe you feel like you can go in there. They've lost 6 of their home games. So, we can go there and get a point, so maybe that's our road win we finally get. So maybe you have to stack your team in order to capitalize on the weekend games and let the Galaxy one, the Austin midweek one, not be important. This is the battle you face when you're trying to win a job as an interim coach. It may be contrary to actually making your team better for 2025.
Oh, I think as well, you think about when Luxan was introduced, they talked about a mini season, right? Having Open Cup, having Leagues Cup. Well, Leagues Cup starts 10 days after the Austin game. So there's that. Okay, well, if the league is a little bit out of reach, do you want to burn players out, or do you want to try and prioritize, a St. Louis team that's not doing amazing right now, a home game against Juarez, and really try and make a push for the latter stages of Leagues Cup.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, maybe Dan's right. Maybe using some kids and some backups over the next couple games is the way to go.
All right. Well, I think that's where we stand at this point. Dan, what else you got for us? Anything?
Not a whole lot. I did see Dallas Trinity have announced Nike as their technical partner.
I saw some
No.
of the gear that they put up online. Some of that stuff's really nice, also expensive.
Yeah, really expensive. Yeah, really nice. Sure, the jerseys will be great. But yeah, the pricing seems a little bit, and I think the same applies to the tickets. Honestly, the pricing just seems a little bit out of reach for a team that's just getting started in a league that's never played. You think about your Fort Worth Vaqueros, Denton Diablos of the world, where it's kind of it's similar. It's not the top level professional ball. It's and the USL Super League is not the NWSL. We can see that from player signings, and in MPSL, those jerseys are about $80, and that is your season ticket. So that's all included. With Dallas Trinity, I think the cheapest ticket is $300, which is more expensive than the cheapest FC Dallas season ticket for fewer games. And then, judging by the price of the merch, is a jersey going to be less than $100? Potentially not.
One of the things I find fascinating about their roster is something that Charlie, who's their, as near as I can tell, their operating owner, the oldest one of the kids, was telling me that they had this big question. They had to try and decide a strategy in terms of how they were signing players. Do they try and get this absolutely full smashing roster right out of the gate, or do they leave a little room? Because their season is unaligned with the NWSL. So like the NWSL season will end and players will come out of contract basically like 2 months into their season. And the same thing will be true with like the fall college season will end. And there'll be players that'll be available coming out of college like at just around December, right? Going into January. Do they leave room for some of these best names, coming out of like UT, for example? There's a couple of really nice Dallas products that will graduate this year. So it'll be interesting in the long run to see which direction they went with their strategy on their roster. I don't know enough about all these players and how they add up and how the league structure is going to work to be able to answer that question right now. And I'll only be able to answer that question based on what they actually do once they get into the season, in terms of like all of a sudden here's some surprise signings a couple months into the year.
You brought up season ticket prices, Stan, and I saw in the Discord that some of the information that is being shared with season ticket holders for Dallas has started to come out for next season. And I think, are we not starting to get a sense of what's going to happen with the stadium next year based on some of the at least what I'm reading in your Discord, Buzz, what appears to be some unbelievably substantial increases in ticket prices?
Yeah, that was an email that I got. It was just like a general sales email. It wasn't to season ticket holders, but it was from Chip, who is the sales director. And there was just a little throwaway line in there about securing season tickets and a half season ticket for $99. A mention of getting in line for 2025 season tickets, which would start at $650 or around for $650. Now, currently, sideline tickets start at $500. If you're including the supporters section, which sometimes they don't because they're weird, the supporters section was about $295 this year. So if they are including that, that's an enormous rise. Even if they're not, that's still $150 rise. Whatever that percentage would work out to, which seems a little bit much. If the stadium work does start in the off season, remember the last time this happened when the 20,500 dropped to under 16,000 for the south end. They raised the prices in some areas by 40%, and jokingly, internally, kind of joked, "Oh, this will be a cakewalk to sell this out," and they didn't have a single sellout that season. It was the puzzle piece.
Yeah,
and it just feels like they're treading that line again.
Well, it is a weird needle to thread between trying to make revenue and figure out how you're going to operate a business in a building that's at least based on what I understand is going to be half closed for the next 3 seasons. And I'm still mystified as to why they aren't playing these seasons in a different place altogether and just knocking this thing out quickly.
It's an interesting question because, they've still announced nothing in terms of this build happening. And I tried to get Jimmy Smith to sort of, I was saying, how come you guys haven't announced anything? And he said, well, basically, there's lots of parties involved in this. Well, lots of parties involved in it means that you never know that something could go sideways. And we're lots of people that we know tell us that these things are moving ahead and that these renovations are coming and that this is the amount of money it's going to be. And this is going to happen and that's going to happen. But until they actually announce something or until we see shovels in the ground without an announcement, it's we really have only operating on, what our sources are telling us that that's going to be the case. So, it's not surprising that maybe we're hearing some funny information about ticket prices or whatever when they maybe aren't even sure, and we're surely not sure how many seats are going to be available. It's a big mystery situation, and I'm sure that they aren't real happy that all this news is out there. But Dan Hunt started talking about it a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone in the organization that's happening. It's not a surprise to us that we think it's happening, except that they won't say it's happening. So.
Well, I guess we'll TBD on that one.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Dan, congratulations once again for making the European final. I'm very delighted for you, sir.
Thank you. I shed a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and drank a few cups of tea.
Well, enjoy that. What is that game on Sunday afternoon?
Sunday, 2:00.
All right. Very good. Buzz, I know you're getting ready to leave on your big walkabout. Oh, you're leaving Friday, right?
Yeah, leaving Friday, and then the window opens basically a week later, so everybody out there can get excited and prepared for Dallas to do all kinds of crazy stuff because they always do when I'm out of town.
Right. They
And
always
obviously
fails.
that means that if Martin Paes is sold, it will happen in the next week.
Yeah, after I leave on Friday. And by the way, we shouldn't undersell the Copa America final, Argentina-Colombia, which ought to be
that'll be amazing.
incredible. Also, the same day as the Euro final, which is unbelievable how that works.
And
Sunday night.
Canada in the third place game.
Yeah, good for Canada, by the way. Jesse Marsh and all that. Third Degree, the podcast, is brought to you by the Lindstrom Law Firm. For wills, trusts, probates, and business law, call 469-515-2559. That's 469-515-2559, or visit lindstromlawfirm.com for a free consultation.
Well, boys, enjoy everything else, and I think we'll try to puzzle. Speaking of puzzles, we'll puzzle piece this episode, or at least Buzz will puzzle piece
tomorrow.
this episode together at some time before it lands in your podcast player.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Thank you, FC Dallas Curious Fan. We will speak to you sometime next week on another episode of Third Degree, the podcast.
Hopefully they won.
Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast.